Welcome to Do It Now, a platform for you to learn from those that have already done it. Do it now.
Mickey, thanks very much for coming on the Do It Now podcast. It's good to see you again.
Absolutely my pleasure, Adam. Absolutely my pleasure.
Cool. We'll just get cracking into the questions if that's good for you. First bit's introductions. Who are you? What line of business are you in? And what area geographically does your company operate?
Well, I'm Micky Kemp. I am from the south of England, just south of London, in Surrey, Hampshire area, which is sort of, if you look on the map, halfway between London and the south coast. We sort of sit in there. I'm in the optical business, and I have owned a chain of retail optical practices, which going back a few years was as many as 10. I sold a few of them off a few years back to scale back a little bit so I could concentrate on living my life a bit. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been running 2 of them, and that's basically what I've been doing.
Right. Okay. Optics, Mickey. Optics. What's exactly is that?
Optics is opticians. Anything to do with the optician business. It's we basically supply glasses and fixed glasses, repair glasses, sunglasses, anything really to do with the eyes, optical business.
Right, I usually jump straight into first jobs and stuff there, but I think you mentioned too much stuff that's too interesting to just jump past that. So you own 10 shops at one point. Being an optician, you own 10 shops and you've scaled it back down now. Could I ask you just initially, how did it all come about, being an optician? Did you go to train when you were younger, specifically for to learn that, Mickey?
Yeah, well, what happened was I left school. When I left school, it was about 81, 82. And it was a really rough time. It was very, 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 very limited work opportunities then. Even this part of the country, which is relatively wealthy and sort of prosperous. Even this part of the country, the job opportunities were awful. And I'd worked on the building trade. I'd worked with friends of mine, mainly doing roofing, but other bits and pieces. I wasn't very good at it, but I did it. And then basically all the business, a bit like now actually, everything just dried up overnight. The whole economy crashed and it was awful. So, you know, we were to sign on, etc. Then Margaret Thatcher came to power around that time. And she had a policy. She said if, like these youngsters, they were going to offer them a job. So basically, you get offered a job or a choice of jobs, and you had to take one. If you didn't take it, you didn't get any benefit money. Now, at the time, I was living with my old mum and dad and that, so I had to pay me keep £10 a week. I thought I was being robbed. £10 a week. You imagine it. So I got offered a choice of 2 jobs. I went to the local library. They called it the Careers Opportunity, and I saw this woman, and she said to me, "These are your jobs. You've got to go to McDonald's or Leighton's Opticians." And I thought, well, I don't want to go to the McDonald's. I didn't know what the opticians really meant. It was working within a workshop with a manufacturing base that they had to make the glasses for all their chain of stores. So I started working for them. And I only really did it temporary. It was only ever going to be like a little temporary thing until the building trade picked up, and then I could go back and do what I wanted to do. But once I started working there, I realised I actually quite liked it. And I went in and started doing an apprenticeship in the what they call an optical technician, which was making lenses and making glasses, and all to do with the technical side of manufacturing, etc. So that's how I came about doing it. And I quite liked the winter mornings, not having to go up on a roof in the freezing cold. So I stuck with it, I'm afraid, purely out of cowardice, no other reason.
So you're giving a bit of credit.
I came to do it.
There, Mickey.
Well, yeah, I mean, I hate to say it to a Scotsman, but a lot of my generation, a lot of my friends and that are in the same boat. And don't get me wrong, at the time we absolutely hated it. We it was like being dragged at gunpoint to go and do something you didn't want to do. And it's surprising how many of us actually, it put us on the right path to decent careers. We were lucky. I'm not thanking. I had a lot to do with it as well, of course, but that's how it came about.
Maybe without that push, you would never have been an optician at all.
Never. Never. I would never in a million years have thought of doing that. And then I learned my trade there. I'd done an apprenticeship. I didn't earn much money. The money wasn't great, but it was okay. And I quite enjoyed the work. I worked with good people, so it was a good laugh and all of that. And the banter was good. And then when I was about 21, they closed it all down. The whole marketplace for opticians changed pretty much overnight. Again, Micky Thatcher had a hand in that. It was up until then, all glasses were supplied to National Health, so everyone pretty much got free glasses. So to save the government a lot of money, she abolished all that. So suddenly it all was privatised overnight, unless you were like an old person or a kid or like low income. So all of a sudden you had these optical practices springing up that were more retail driven than what followed them before, which was more to do with the medical side. And the company I worked for really got caught with it, wrong-footed, really, if you like. The whole industry changed overnight, and they didn't change with it. So we were made redundant, and I went and worked for one of the newer breed of opticians who were very frowned upon at the time, but I quite enjoyed that as well. So I was making the glasses in the back room, in a shop, rather than being in a remote factory where everything was sent. I was in the shop making the glasses. And what happened was I'd find that every time a customer had a problem, if they couldn't see or some issue with their glasses, the manager would always call me out. He'd say, "Oh, Mike, can you come and see Mrs. Jones? She's having trouble with her bifocals or whatever." And I quickly realised that I was fixing all the problems. I was sorting out all the issues. And I sort of realised very quickly, I'm the only one who knows what I'm actually bloody doing. So that drove me to start up working for myself. And I did that probably when I was about 23, maybe 24. I opened my first place, and I had 400 quid. I managed to scrape together 400 quid, and I begged and borrowed and set this little place up. And didn't do eye testing. I just said to people, "Come and see me for your glasses." And I had lots of friends who wore them, so I had a ready-made base, if you like, which helps. I would just in the general terms of what we're talking about, I'd say to anyone who was thinking of starting up on their own in any business, no matter what you're doing, if you're doing window cleaning or you're doing carpentry or building work, whatever you're doing, really take care of your friends and family. That's your bread and butter, and from them everything comes. I've seen a lot of people who start up in business, and what they do is they immediately spend fortunes on advertising, and they run around and they spend all their money. Some of it goes to an accountant, some goes to a solicitor, some goes to this, some goes to that, and they're running around trying to get a window cleaning round, and they've not spoke to the next door neighbour. They've not asked their granny or their Auntie Flo, you know what I mean? So your bread and butter is on your doorstep. If you've got something that people need or they want. So that's what I did. And that got me started. Everyone I knew, I networked amongst those people and said, "Look, come see me for glasses, blah, 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 blah." Anyway, that was that. So that was one shop. And then very quickly, within 6 months, we opened another one. And I was fearless. I was young. I wouldn't do it now. I mean, I looked back at what I did and I think, God, you must have been mad. But within the space of 3 or 4 years, I had 10 of these little shops that ranged across the south of England, down in fact as far as Devon, down near a place called Honiton in Devon, I think was our furthest one, up as far as Croydon on the outskirts of London. And that was it. And I ran that for about 10 years and then pretty much burnt myself out, I think. And I had a young family, which I didn't spend much time with. So I sold them all and just kept two local ones, which allowed me to ease back a little bit, So that's how that came about.
Right, cool. You'd said there that obviously right at the start that you'd kind of witnessed the beginning of private entity opticians, I believe. So before it was NHS that provided it, then the private entity, it changed and the government changed things where the private entity could come into things. So then you had to move away from what you were doing initially into private entity, a private sector kind of thing, doing that. And it was quite young, Micky, that you started your own company. You're 23, it's quite a young age to be thinking like that. Can I ask you if I could go into a wee bit more detail in the company you're working with before the age of 23? What was the thought process, and a wee bit more detail into how did you actually go about starting up your first place?
Well, but what the thought process was I'd worked for this older style traditional company, which was a family run business in Farnham where I live, and their ethics was very much based upon good customer service. You know, in those days you'd go and see your optician and you'd have the same guy you'd see him, and your mum had seen him and your granny had seen him, and it's like your doctor, you know, you had the same person. So I'd worked for a company with those sort of ethics. And people liked that. What they didn't like was the high prices that came with it. Once the NHS was taken off the table and people had to start paying, the prices were very, very, very expensive. I mean, you know, if you bought a pair of glasses privately, I remember in those days, to give you an example, I was probably earning about £150 a week. And in the company I worked for, one frame, you couldn't buy a frame for £150 in the shop. They didn't have anything that cheap. So, you know, a pair of glasses in those days would probably be the equivalent now, in real terms, maybe £500 to £600, £700 for something, nothing special, you know. So people liked the good service. And so I then worked for the other place. And that was very much, you know, more commercially driven, and they were a lot cheaper, but they sold rubbish. You know, it was like the service was awful. They really didn't employ people who really knew what they were doing too well. They took anyone on. It was just one of them sort of operations, and people liked the prices more, but the quality of service and the quality of product was awful. So I sort of looked at it with a critical eye on both sides, and I thought, well, if I could offer the service that people like, but at the price I know they want to pay, I could make some serious money here. Because these frames, the glass I'm telling you that were £150, for instance, I knew I could buy a frame like that for, I don't know, £5 or maybe, let's say £5 to £6. So I thought, well, I won't buy something for £5 and sell it for 150. I'll sell it for £5 and I'll give people a free second pair. I think I was the first person to do this free second pair thing, which a lot of them do now, but I think I was the first. And what that allowed me to do was give people a more bang for their buck. So I could sell 2 pairs of glasses for £60, if you like, and I could make, I don't know, you know, £45 profit quite easy. And that was good money in those days. You know, it was like, you know, if you sold 1 pair of glasses a day, you'd made your money, you know, straight away. And I was doing 20 pairs on a Saturday. So it was very lucrative for me all the time I was involved in the business myself. When I got bigger, I had to employ other people. It wasn't so good. And that's another side of business that people should always look at. There's only one of you, and it's hard to get people who care as much as you do about your business, you know.
So would you say you thought about taking the best of both businesses? You felt as if the family run was quite good from the family run aspect, it was quite good from the first company, and then the second company, they were given the same product was just a lot cheaper. So you tried to take the two aspects of them. And then how did it actually come about setting up the first shop? How did you go about it? Did you go identify a shop and save up a bit of money or get a loan? Or
yeah, well, I'll tell you where it was. There's a little market town near me called Alton, which you wouldn't have heard of, but it's a nice little town. And I happened to be there one day and I saw a sign up to let, and I was in the back. It was a little walk through. There was a guy in the front part of the building that had like a little cafe stroke restaurant stroke pizza parlor, and out the back there was 3 or 4 rooms. There was a lady that sold bits and pieces for doing knitting and sewing and all that sort of stuff. There was a hairdresser's there, a lady's hairdresser's, and then there was an empty shop, and it was only about as big as an average front room. And I think it cost me 80 quid a week. So I took that on. Right. And I went to the local newspaper, and I took on, you know, like I said earlier, I had lots of business from people I knew anyway, so I knew they were going to come to me. But I then took out adverts in the local paper, which I used to buy late space. So if ever they had, like, the day before they had to print the paper, if they had a free page, they'd come and say to me, you know, I let them know that I was the man who was going to take the advert. So I used to get these full page adverts for sometimes 100, 150 quid, you know, £1,000, £2,000 worth of advertising, but it would be late space. So I would take that, and that helped me as well. You know, I couldn't ever have afforded to do it properly and pay the going rate, but I was what they call a disruptor now, I think. I would just look for an angle all the way. And I think it was just growing up, because most opticians came from good backgrounds, and they came from they were very well educated, middle class people. And I hate to generalise, but most of them have never really had to duck and dive in their life. You know, they were used to, a bit like doctors and dentists, if you like. They went and they learnt their job through the universities and colleges, and then they went and there was almost like they deserved to earn their money, if you like. It was like, you know, and then all of a sudden I was there. And I guess I was a bit like Ryanair or bloody matey from JB Sports. You know, they didn't know what to make of it. I was wheeling and dealing. I had a great guy I knew in London, a guy called Navin Shah, I think his name was. And anyway, he had a business that I'd met him through the trade, because I came from the wholesale, the manufacturing bit. I'd met him through that, and he used to buy all discontinued designer stock from all the big companies. And of course, I knew where he was. And if you went and knocked on the door and went in and saw him, and you had a few quid, you could buy, you know, all the good stuff, if you like, and it was cash in hand, no questions answered. So I was selling Christian Dior, Ray-Ban, Ralph Lauren, all the big designer stuff. I was actually selling it cheaper than most opticians were buying it. Right. So I was
a working class,
a real nuisance.
Micky.
I was the first one, mate. I tell you, you come in my shop, we had the most popular music I remember was Van Morrison. Right. Believe it or not, Van Morrison. We put a Van Morrison album on. Everyone come in, loved it. I used to put a bit of Bruce on, but some people didn't like that. And pop music was out of the question, obviously, in those days. And classic rock, Beatles, anything like that, because my age group was that sort of, you know, older people mostly wear glasses. So Van Morrison that was my secret of my success. If Moondance was on, we were having a good day.
Working class and could appreciate that £200 for a pair of glasses felt extortionate, maybe. Do you think that's what you're trying to explain? Maybe other opticians around you felt as if that was completely reasonable.
Absolutely, mate.
You coming from maybe a working class background realised that wasn't, so you were trying to give as best a value as you could in your company. Being working class, you feel that maybe was the case. But just in your first initial startup years, was there anything really tough about it, or did it take off really well, very quick?
No, it took off fantastically. I mean, it was phenomenal. I mean, we were like, I was really, really helped because the local paper found out that what I was doing, and they came and done a story on me. And basically the story was that I'd been given my P45 by this company I worked for, who were a big employer in the local district. And now I was setting up in opposition to them. So, you know, I literally had people coming in off the street, shaking my hand and saying, I don't need anything now, but when I do, I'll be in here. Good luck to you, you know, good luck. Good. And so that was a godsend, you know, that was a real, that helped me massively. I think the thing that really sets you apart in any business is in something like that anyway, is personal service. You've got to be yourself. Don't hide in the back room. A lot of people start businesses and they get all young staff and that running the show, and then they're hiding out the back doing the bookwork. And that should never be the case. You know, that you should be the front and foremost should be you. You've got to be there. People want to see the man. They want to see the boss. You know what I mean? And if you go into a pub, you want to see the landlord. We're used to. I mean, it's all changed now, of course, but you know, that's how you wanted it. You know, when you go anywhere, you know, it doesn't matter what you're buying. If people like you, that they will buy off you and they will buy your product. And that's what I always did. And I found that really easy, right from the word go, really, really good. I had some great success. I touched on it earlier. Once I started growing and employing other people, that became more problematic, because to try and instill the way you do things into other people is near impossible.
Build a team which thinks the way you're wanting your company to operate. I can only relate that to thinking about, you're talking about service, providing a really good service along with the product, the better the service. I think you were trying to say there. I think about when I go out to a restaurant, Mickey, if the food is amazing, the food can be amazing, but see if the service is really poor and you're not getting the attention and it doesn't come in time and all the rest of it, ruins it. But whereas if you're spending a lot of money, service is great, the food's great, or the food's good, then you're happy. But the food can be totally amazing, and the service really poor, and it would ruin it. And I think that's maybe a kind of analogy for it, maybe there. So you like to be front of house as well. You felt quite a lot of the time front of house and being the face of your company, and that helps for that story. You feel as if that. But
you know, likewise in the restaurant that you were talking, which is a very good analogy. But you could go to a restaurant where the service is brilliant, and you see the owner, and he's a nice guy, and his family there maybe, and the food might just be average, but you'll still go. You know what I mean? It's like, don't get me wrong, if both are good, that's a bonus.
Aye, definitely.
Yeah? I mean, look at where we met, that pub we met, you know, when we played music there. I mean, look at that place. My God. I mean, but it was a dump. It was awful. But wasn't it great?
I don't know if there was many places we played music that weren't there, dump, Mickey. But
it's the people. Yeah, all of them really. But no, you know, Adam, it proves the point. It's about the people and about what the vibe and what's going on. You know, you're like me. You would walk into some posh Wetherspoon, not posh, but you know, a nicely refurbished Wetherspoons, and it's soulless. It's awful. I don't want to be there. And it's the same way you buy your things. Where you know, I don't want to. If I'm buying a car, I want to go and see a matey with his little car lot who you know, who's been there a few years, who does me a deal. I don't want to go to some big main dealer and speak to Kevin with his cheap suit. No, I'm having that.
I think a personal touch goes a long way then, Mickey. Kind of personal touch, being the front house goes a long way in the initial years. So see if I could just
everything
when it went to multiple shops, Mickey, was there new pressures there? And how did you go about the multiple shops? Did you have to work extra hard, or were you just expanding that fast or growing that fast that you felt as if it was just a natural progression of things?
Both really, mate. There was a whole new level of pressure that was completely different, because suddenly you weren't responsible for what you were doing. Someone else was responsible. You were responsible, but you had no control over it. I mean, we had some good staff. I'd put it at 50-50. I was young and I was inexperienced, and it was the one I could honestly say, the one thing I would change, and the one mistake I made. I thought it was easy. I thought, oh, I've done this, and this, I can do it. Anyone can do it. And then that doesn't transcribe to be the case. You know, we had one or two shops that were brilliant because we had good people in them, but we had one or two that should have been really good. You know, great position, you know, very little competition, and they never took off. And it's invariably down to in that business anyway. It was invariably down to the staff. You know, it's tiny little nuances. You can't make someone likable. You can't teach someone to be relaxed and likable. You know, they either are or they're not. That's it. And I also found as well, I made a big mistake as well at one time of employing people who, I went for people who really like knew what they were doing in depth. I thought that was really important. And then I found out that was the least important bit of it. You know, you'd rather have a really nice person who was affable and friendly and polite and decent and cared than someone who might be technically brilliant and know all the aspects of the job, but wasn't a people person, you know. So there's that comes into play as well, you know.
Right, so moving into multiple shops, you had to deal with having staff, and that came with its own challenges just out with your business altogether. Somebody who didn't have the friendliest of personalities but had the a really good knowledge of being an optician maybe drove away customers, so there was nobody to be a really good optician there for, type thing.
Exactly. It all come down. The worst person I employed, and I won't mention names, but the worst person I employed worked in the business with me when I first started. He was one of my bosses, and he knew he could make a pair of lenses out of an ashtray. If you gave him a glass ashtray, an hour later you'd have a pair of glasses. Right. You know, the guy was brilliant with his hands. And I put him in one of the shops, and it was the nosedive off a cliff. It was absolutely horrendous. You know, he just had no personality. You know, I got on well with him. He was all right, but he was a bit strange. You know, he wasn't a people person. He was not a bad person. He was a very nice guy, but he didn't come across that way to the public. So I had him on one side. On the best person I ever had was a guy who had worked for many years on airlines. He was a flight manager, if you like, of airlines. He'd worked for Virgin, and he'd worked for BA business class. So his customer service skills were second to none. You know, He was absolutely, on the ball with everything, and he followed things through. But he knew nothing at all about glasses. He soon learned. I mean, in the job he was in, he didn't need to know that much. He was helping people choose frames, etc. So it wasn't like he was, doing anything too difficult. But the difference in the turnover of the shops where the two worked was astronomical. You couldn't believe it would make such a difference. One of them's turning over 30,000 a month, the other's turning over 6,000 a month. That was the difference, and they should have been the same.
The personnel in the shops, how many staff, Mickey, did each shop have to operate with?
Usually 2 full-time, and then there'd be a part-time, and if we did eye testing there, then you'd have an optician come in sometimes 2 or 3 times a week, and then you'd probably have extra staff to cover that, because on that particular day it'd be busy, people coming in. You need someone filling in the forms and doing all that paperwork stuff that goes along with that side of things.
So I take it one person. Sorry, carry on, mate.
Do what? Sorry, mate.
I take it one person would be appointed manager, or one person would they be specifically an optician, Mickey? Would they need to have the training of an optician?
Yeah, the guy who did the eye testing would be the person who would need to be a fully trained, qualified optician, and that's a completely different skill set. That's those guys are on the same level as probably a bit above, actually. Those guys are like GPs. They've done the university, the 5 years. They need to be experts in that field. I never did that side of things. I was what they called a dispensing optician. So I was like a chemist, if you like. But the guys who do the eye testing, optometrists or opticians, they're different. They're a different thing. They sort of sit, if you like, they're part of the business, but they're set aside from the business. If you sort of know what I mean.
Right, I see. So you were saying there that it was dependent on the personalities then in each shop, dependent on how well that shop did. The better the personality, not necessarily the better they were at their job, but the better the personality, then the better that shop took off.
Absolutely.
Found that. That's quite interesting. It's quite an interesting part of that.
Yeah, it shocked. That was the big learning curve I had, Adam. That's what I found. It took me a long time to really find that out, but that really was it. It's funny because sometime after that, the big chain in the UK, which you would have heard of, everyone else, is Specsavers. Yeah. They were starting up, and they started recruiting people from the optical industries. People who know what they're doing, for want of a better expression. And I noticed within a few years, suddenly their advertising, their advertising for staff changed completely. They suddenly didn't want opticians anymore. They were advertising for retail managers. Mm-hmm. So I think they went down the same curve as I did. They sort of found that, in terms of running the store, they were on a bigger operation than me, of course, on a bigger scale. And they'd have, sometimes in the big cities like Glasgow, for instance, if they were there, they'd probably have, 20 staff, So they would have a retail manager running the operation who would have a different set of skill sets, but it would be someone who perhaps necessarily didn't know much about glasses, but was more about the managing of the people.
Mickey,
it's interesting how it all changed.
Sorry, did you do you employ, or are you trained as, as you're saying, you need to have a doctorate in eyes, whether it is an optometrist that would be called, I don't know what the name would be, but did you employ any of them, or did you work alongside them, or how does your business?
No, we employed some.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, we employed some, and we used mostly we used regular, what they call locums. So it'd be, you would go to an agency, you would have a bank of them, and we'd say, look, we're looking for someone to do 3 days a week in Honiton, in Devon, for instance. So they'd look around and say, well, we've got a lady who lives in Torquay and she can do 2 days. She can give you every Tuesday and every Friday. So we say, yeah, that'd be fine. So that's it. And then you'd basically have the same. Once you got someone set up, if they were good, you'd have them working there. They'd just do their regular days all the time.
Right, you set up a schedule
on a self-employed basis.
You set up a schedule with your clients, and then just set up the basically a schedule with your is it an optometrist it's called? Is that right? Have I just made
that's
that
it? Yep, you got it. Adam, you're learning fast. I wish you don't fancy setting the shop up in Beath, do you?
Starting the dark. I talk about people's eyes. I don't know if people would want to come into my shop. I could maybe be friendly enough to them, Mickey, right enough. Maybe it might work. Maybe you're right. I could be friendly. I know nothing about eyes, but come in and we'll have a look anyway. I'm going to have a wee look at my notes and see where we're at with us. So how did your previous career lead into this? We've covered that. How did you do at school, Mickey? If I could ask you that in the first instance, early days, how did you do at school, mate?
I was always good. You know, I was good at subjects. I was good at school, but I didn't apply myself very well. I left about 15. I never took any exams. I never did anything like that.
Right.
I don't think I fit in with academic learning, if you know what I mean. Some people don't.
Yeah.
I don't think I was stupid. I had good friends who went on to university and became very good in their field, and I would have said I was a lot smarter than they were, you know.
Right, okay.
But we've all got our areas we're good at things, you know. So.
Yeah, I'd agree. Everybody's got their thing. Would you say that you always had business acumen, or would you say it was just a natural progression of things through a wee bit of chance and a wee bit of luck, or would you think you were maybe always kind of destined?
No, I always had that business acumen. I know I did from a young age. I tell you a little story. I used to love cheese when I was a kid. If we went to the shops, my mum would buy. My brothers and sisters have sweets. I know it's a very, very, very sad story, but I liked a bit of cheese. I didn't like sweets much. I still love cheese. And I found out very young, probably before I went to school, there was a little shop near where we lived, and I knew if I went in there and smiled at the lady and chatted her up and told her how nice she looked, I think I can remember her name. I think I called her Auntie Jean or something, but I knew if I smiled at her in the right way and give her a little, look, she'd cut me off a little bit of cheese from the block. I said, we like this cheese. So that was probably the start of my career as a general con man. I think the cheese incident. The great cheese incident.
That's a strange innuendo story, Mickey.
It was actually cheese. We didn't have anything else in those days. It was just cheese.
Could go a million directions with that one. What have you found that obviously you didn't work for people for very long because you started up yourself when you were 23? Would you say that the self-autonomy for that you really enjoyed working for yourself, and you could never go back to kind of working for people? You currently own 2 shops now. Got something to say on that at all? That working for yourself?
100%. I am unemployable. I could not work for anyone. Within a week of working for myself, I became unemployable. I know I did. It was just, and I think that really pretty much applies to everyone who goes and works for themselves. Well, not everyone, obviously, but I think the vast majority of people, if they're honest, once you've done your own thing, you work for yourself, you can't go back. I couldn't. I'm not against it. I don't think I'm too good for it or anything like that. I have worked for other people in different ways, and I've had breaks from the industry and gone and worked for friends, basically as an employer. But I've gone back and worked. I worked for a year on fruit and vegetables for a mate of mine. And I was shouted and abused on a regular basis for about 12 hours a day.
Really?
Oh yeah, in the market. That was hard work, and I loved it. I didn't mind. I mean, I was one of the ones shouting, bananas.
Yeah.
We got the bananas. We got.
You're selling rotten vegetables, Mickey. Why are they shouting at you?
It was. I was never quick enough. I was the person who loaded it. I used to have to go to the van and come back. And these blokes, it's the hardest business. It was really funny talking about that business. There was at the time I was doing that. There was some story in the press, or it was a TV show or something, and they said, "What's the hardest job?" And they narrowed it down, to being people who worked in the fruit and veg game in the markets. There was that. There was hod carriers, and there was people who worked on oil rigs. It was between. And this job, I used to get up in the morning and go drive to Covent Garden Market in London, and I was up at like four maybe in the morning. And I'd get there and load up this lorry, and I'd drive it down. Winchester was the market we worked at, Winchester. So I'd go to London to Winchester, a long way. And then we'd do Winchester Market, and, I'd be there about 8 o'clock in the morning unloading. I'd have done that. And it was a big lorry, I'd unload it all. But there wasn't enough room to put everything out. So as you sold stuff, you'd have to keep running back and getting it. But the lorry was parked about 200 yards away. So you'd be running back and getting some old spuds. And I just couldn't keep going like the rest of the guys. They were like maniacs, They were running. And I realised I'd been there about 3 months, and I realised why. They were all taking these drugs. They were taking some. I don't quite know what it was.
All right, okay.
But they'd be running around at 9 o'clock, and they'd still be running around at 5, 6 o'clock. They're all about 7 stone soaking wet.
When did you do that? When did this come about?
Well, I had a break from the optical business when I sold all my shops.
Right.
I employed someone to basically run them, and I was doing nothing for a while. And then it was really just helping a friend of mine out. I only did it for about 9 months, over one summer.
Right. All right. Have you changed the scenery?
Yeah. So I'm only mentioning it because I was in that effect working for someone, and I didn't mind it. I wasn't adverse to it, but I wasn't good at it. I couldn't take the drugs. That was the problem. They did. They took this.
Can you take all the drugs?
I don't know what it was.
Take all the drugs?
I just kept them going. It was crazy. I don't know what they were doing. They used to put it in their coffee, and I would never do it.
I don't know if that's a good way to go. I don't know if that's a good way to go about your working career. I don't know how many. I don't know how many years you're going to last. Maybe get through a lot of work.
You got it.
Couple of years, but
you got it. That was
longevity.
Yeah, that's the way it was, man. That's the way it was. It does. I would imagine there's a lot of businesses like that are similar. And they get very burnt out very easy. There was no old people doing it. There was no old men doing it.
I bet certain professions or certain types of young guys that's just built for that and the upper levels and doing stuff like that. Mickey, you said earlier on that you'd got to a stage you'd built up your empire and your shops. You'd got to maybe 10 shops, obviously a couple of them at a time, just slowly building up. What actually happened that you decided to scale it all back and just? What, was there a breaking point? Was it too much, or did you decide that you could earn off a two? What happened there, Mickey?
Well, what I started. I was late, as you know me through playing music. I started as a hobby. Bought my first guitar when I was 30, so I started playing guitar. And I always loved music, and I learned. I wasn't very good at it. I learned 3 or 4 chords, and I started writing songs, etc. And I would start. I went to some local jam sessions, and one of the guys who was in the area I live in was quite a well-known musician. He always had bands and different things, and I'd go to this and take my songs with all the chords written out and give them to the guys and say, look. And I was the only one there doing my own songs. Everyone was playing, Brown Eyed Girl and bloody Oasis and all this stuff, whatever it was at the time. So I would go there, and this one particular guy said to me, "Oh, these are good songs. These are good. You should have a band." He said, "I'll get a band." So within about a year of me doing that, I had my own little band, and we entered a couple of Battle of the Band competitions, and we won them.
All right.
So from that, I recorded a couple of albums, and then I met a mutual friend, a guy called Joe D'Urso. You know Joe from New York.
Yeah.
I went to New York to see Bruce Springsteen, and while I was over there, one of the nights we were there was no gig, so we went down to this local bar in New York City, and I met Joe, a big friend of Billy Crawford.
I'm trying to get Joe,
and me and Joe
just now, Sommer. I've sent Joe.
You're trying to get hold of Joe.
Trying to get a hold of him just now. God Hunter had suggested to get a hold of Joe. I think Joe does the Light of Day Festival. He does that as a kind of career, travelling about quite a bit. That'd be an interesting story. But sorry to cut you off, Mickey. There, you were saying.
Well, no, that's all right. Joe's just keep on with Joe, because Joe would be fantastic. Joe's a great guy. Joe's a great guy to talk to in this sort of environment. He's very knowledgeable and entertaining. He's very interesting. But you have to keep on with Joe, because he's a busy guy. But he'd do it for you. I speak to Willie Nile as well. Willie's good. Willie would.
Well, I know. That'd be interesting as well. I need to get in touch with God Hunter. God will maybe send Joe a wee message. I don't know whether I'm sending it to his fans page, Joe D'Urso's fans page. I've been sending him a couple of messages. But I don't know whether he's got a private page that he maybe pays more attention to. But I'll get him eventually. But I kind of stopped you there, sorry, in the middle. So
no, that's all right.
Your music could.
So I started doing the music really, Adam, and I met Joe, and he said he was looking at coming to the UK, and he found it really difficult to tour. And I had all the equipment by then, and I said, well, I'll help you. I'll do it with you, sort of thing. So I put together a tour for Joe. I just rang venues and rang people I knew. And Joe came over a couple of times. We had some really successful tours. And I think my business acumen was probably better than most musicians. Most musicians, they're not business people, but naturally, some are, of course. And through Joe, I got asked for a few other musicians. Oh, can you help me with my tour? Can you do this? So I found myself spending less and less time in the shop and in the office, if you like, working, and more doing the music side, which I obviously enjoyed much more. So at that time, really, I decided I'd scale things back. And I never thought for one moment I'd ever make it as a musician. I didn't think that, but I enjoyed being on the peripheral edges. And I probably for about 10 years, I toured with many different acts. Some of them I just worked as tour manager for. People like Frank Zappa's old band. I did a tour with them. The Magic Band, Captain Beefheart's Magic Band, them guys. I did about 6 tours with them. Of course, Willie Nile did maybe 6, 7, 8 complete tours with Willie Nile. The Magic Band and the Zappa guys. Some of that was Europe, all around Europe as well. Joe D'Urso, of course, my old mate Bill Kirchen from Texas. We had Bill over at least a dozen times, maybe, and it was great. I was, kept really busy doing that, and I really, really enjoyed that. That was great. But here comes the big problematic bit with that. It's very difficult to earn money. I could earn money for the band, so not massive. No one got rich, but the bands could pay their way. But I think what really took the shine off it, Adam, if I'm honest, was when I think around 2008, 2009, the last big crash, when the economy fell, the pound rate fell through the floor. Up till then, like Joe, for instance, if Joe did a gig and let's say for argument's sake, £1,000, that was at one time that was $1,800. Now there's enough there to go round. All of a sudden, when that £1,000 becomes, $1,200 or $1,300, $1,250, it's a big lump to lose. £1,000 was still £1,000, but for them guys, suddenly so it was very difficult for me to to make any money. And as much as, you know, money wasn't my main motivation for doing that, you know, it has to come into it. You know, I sort of, yeah, so I scaled back a bit from that and really concentrated on my optical business.
The price of living doubled around about then, Mickey, 2008. The price of living just doubled. Everything cost.
Easy, yeah.
Just doubled.
Yeah, I mean, factor into that as well, Adam. You know, in the part of the country I live in, you know, I love it here. It's nice, but to give you an idea, you know, if you buy, let's say I lived in the outskirts of Birmingham at the time, you could probably buy a 3-bedroom house for £100,000 would buy you something nice. Well, here, £100,000 won't buy you a garage. You just put your car in. You know, you're talking 500,000 up. So when you're living having to live at that level, you know, and you've got them costs on your life before you start, you know, you can't do a week on the road and come home with 300 quid anymore. As good as that week might be, you know, and, you know, I got kids, and by then my kids were getting into their sort of early 20s and late teens, and suddenly their toys and their things they wanted started becoming more expensive. You know, their cars became cars, laptops, iPhones.
Did it serve you well, Mickey? The optician, the shops, is it obviously you grew it to 10 shops and then scaled it back through. You wanted to go do a bit of touring with music, sounds cool, and obviously it sounds to me as if it's maybe served you quite well. It's allowed you to have that freedom at the age of 30 to think, I'm going to go do this for a wee while. Did you maybe have a wee bit of financial security at the back of you to allow you to do all that through growing and expanding the shop? Did it serve you well financially?
Adam, yeah, do you know what, man? I've been so lucky. I mean, I through on one of the tours, it was really funny. An incident happened, which was Joe D'Urso rang me and said, oh, you got friends in Scotland, you know, and it all involves Tam, you know, our mutual friend Tam Skinner, the greatest promoter that's north of Adrian's Wall. So Joe rang me and said, look, the Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, who were one of my favourite bands. I idolised Southside Johnny. You had Springsteen from New Jersey, and then you had Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, who I absolutely. I mean, I drove to for my first ever proper gig I went to was seeing Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes, and I went to see them. Within a week of passing my test, I drove from where I lived to North London, right through all the traffic. And it was horrendous. You know, if my 17-year-old, 18-year-old daughter, as I was then, said, I'm driving to North London I wouldn't let her go. And I drove to Nottingham to see him. Anyway, I idolised Southside Johnny. So when Joe said to me, you know, Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes are playing in Newcastle, but they've got 3 or 4 days off. They've got a couple of gigs fall through. They're playing Thursday night in Newcastle, and then they've got nothing, I think, till Monday or Tuesday at the Renfrew Ferry. He said, could you sort a couple of gigs out? They just want to play. They want something to do. So I rang Tam. I said to Tam, look, do you fancy Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes in your bar on his hotel in Arran? He was like, you're kidding me. I said, no. So anyway, the deal was done. And the deal was I would pick Southside Johnny and the Asbury Jukes up in my van from Newcastle and take them the next morning to Arran. It was the Isle of Arran, sorry. So I turn up in Newcastle and introduce myself, and they say, okay, great, you know. And Southside Johnny, who I say was an absolute idol of mine, you know, it was like meeting a god. He came and sort of looked at me and said, oh, you're the guy, right, okay. And he says to me, are you a musician? Do you play yourself? I said, yeah. He said, do you have your guitar with you? I said, yeah. He said, our support act hasn't turned up. He said, get up and do something.
Okay, cool.
But this was in Newcastle, about 2,000-3,000 people there, maybe.
Right.
So I went on stage as an opening act. I didn't expect to. I just walked on, and I played about half an hour set, my own songs. And I could, out the corner of my eye here, I could see Southside Johnny behind the curtain with a guy called Bobby Bandiera. Bobby Bandiera was very famous guitarist from that band who had played with everybody. Phenomenal guitarist. Went on to be with Bon Jovi and has really got a pedigree second to none. But anyway, they stood and watched me play this set. Now, I'm terrified, you know, I'm literally playing in front of these people, but I don't care about the 3,000. I can see this guy 6 foot from me staring at me. You know? So anyway, I did the gig and I came off the stage and he said to me, are those songs yours? Did you do those songs? I said, yeah, I wrote that stuff. He said, have you recorded that stuff? I said, no. He said, you've got to come to New Jersey with us. We'll record them. So I thought, yeah, that's really nice for him to say, you know. Anyway, I ended up doing a whole tour with them. They liked me. I got on great. We went to Tams. We all got drunk and had a great time. And I ended up doing a whole European tour with them. We went to Norway and Denmark and Germany and everywhere. Cool. And I opened for them most nights. Anyway, about 6 months afterwards, they'd gone home and Joe D'Urso turned up and he said, I bumped into Southside Johnny. He said, where are you? They're waiting for you. And I said, get over there. So I thought he was kidding. He said, no, they're serious. So I went and made an album with those guys in New Jersey in a recording studio. And that was a dream come true. I mean, that was just like, you know, I've often said to friends of mine, you know, it's like if you played football for your local pub team, it's like all of a sudden you're playing for Man United, you know. I mean, how many people get to do that?
Sounds awesome. Sounds brilliant. So it does meeting your idols and then them asking you to record and taking you across to New Jersey.
Yeah,
what you said to record sounds awesome. So
it was just an unbelievable experience, mate. And that's where music can take you. And that's where I think having the right attitude and being a decent, you know, I think I was a decent person to those guys. I helped them out. I didn't want nothing for it. You know, I've never been one to look at the short-term immediate gain. You know, it's another thing. Then it goes, it's not just life, it's business as well. Don't go for the quick buck. You know, have some integrity, do things right, and the rewards will come to you. They will.
So is you and your band still available for hire, or do you just kind of specifically go to places you know? Or?
Yeah, no, we do both. I mean, we're always available for anything's considered. You know, anything.
Cool. You can check out YouTube, I believe, Micky.
And I mean anything. Do what, mate?
You can check your music out on YouTube, can't you? I'm sure. Or is it on any other platforms?
Not really. I'm not good at promoting myself really on the music side of things. So well, I put a few videos up.
I can promote you. I've heard your music and I've seen the kind of sets you put on, and it's kind of a performance along with you taking the reins of a kind of musical show as well. I believe, Micky, you bring a couple of other acts with you as well at times, or other people come along and play, and you put on a night's performance along with just a set of music as well. I'd say that's fair to say, Micky.
Yeah, that's when it's best. I think I've always tried to use my position for the small value it's got anywhere. Like, you know, we came to Scotland many times, as you know, and we had lots of friends up there. You included, and Billy and all the guys from and Rambo and all the boys and the girls from Beath and the other towns we played.
Yeah.
And therefore, when I had any touring acts come over, I would say to them, you know, we've got to go to Beath, or we go to Largs, or one of those, anywhere up there, because I knew that there would be there. You know, it wouldn't be the greatest gig in the world, but I knew that any of those acts that came there would be treated respectfully. They would have the time of their life. They would have a great night, and they did. You know, you've seen them. You know. Some of the names that we had that played those little venues were astounding. You know, just you look. I didn't think anything of it then because I was in the middle of it all. But you look back and you think it's crazy. You know, there was one really night we was actually on the Isle of Bute.
Sorry, Micky, I cut you off.
Do you what, mate?
Carry on, mate. What you were saying? I nearly cut you off. Sorry, you were saying.
No, I was just thinking we were on the Isle of Bute once, and I remember it being Tam's birthday, and he had, I mean, these names won't mean anything to anyone listening. They might do to you, I don't know. But I was there with Joe D'Urso, and we had a friend of ours called Brent Best, who we were touring with at the time. Brent Best was a phenomenal singer-songwriter from Texas. Probably the besides perhaps Ryan Adams, probably the best Americana songwriter of his generation. You know, this guy's in his field is up there. You know, so he was with us. In the same place, there was a guy from Newcastle, Martin Stevenson, who never really made it as a household name, but in the Northeast is as big a star as Mark Knopfler or any Northeast. You know, he's up there in that, you know, Newcastle area sort of legendary status with the big names. He's there. We had Baz Warne was there. Baz Warne was the lead singer of the Stranglers. Right, he's there. Right. We had a guy called Bap Kennedy, sadly passed away. Bap was a phenomenal musician from Northern Ireland, London-based guy who'd made albums with Emmylou Harris and Steve Earle, and the real pedigree, you know, the phenomenal musician. And we're all there. We're in one place, this bar. This place is like, well, probably about as big as that place we played in Beath, you know, in the back room. It was smaller than that, probably. And this talent is there. And I don't include myself when I say the talent, but I'm looking around. I'm saying, this is unbelievable. If you had this line up on a small festival, you'd have done them proud, you know. And incidentally, just as a funny story, but besides that there was a guy there with one of the musicians from Newcastle, and I was on holiday in Lanzarote last year, 2 years ago, before the virus, and I'm walking down the street and I saw this playing tonight, and I see this picture of this guy, and I said to my mate I was with, I'm sure I know that guy. So we went into this bar in Lanzarote, and the guy was playing, and he saw me come in, and he finished the song, and he came over and he said, I know you, don't I? Where do I know you from? I said, I know, I saw you. I said, I can't think. I know you. That's why I came in. He said, did you ever go to Scotland? I said, yeah. He said, was you at Tam's party? But of course I was. And this guy was there. I can't remember the guy's name now. He was a good musician from Newcastle, and he was there, one of the guys who was there. And there he was in Lanzarote. So, you know, we ended up spending a few days with him. You know, drink was drunk, stories were told, no prisoners were taken. And, you know, it's a silly little story, I guess, but from that music, from that little guitar that you get, that I went and bought and taught myself a few little chords. You know, I've mixed with some of the very best musicians. I've toured with some of the greats. You know, I'm not nothing special. I'm not. Please don't think I'm saying that. And it's not name dropping. It's just saying this is it. This is what happened. You know, there it was, and it can happen. You know, it's just there is magic in the night.
Teaching yourself that one new skill opened up all the doors, Micky. That one new skill you decided to teach yourself, and I think you said you were 30 when you decided to teach yourself how to play the guitar. Which is a bit on again. Usually most folk are younger than that, but that opened up all the doors to it. I guess there's probably too many good nights to mention them all, Micky. Do you know if you were to mention them all? Just one I could mention, the one
there are
in the Masonic Hall when Wally Nile came over that night. That was a great night. I think you played that. I'm pretty sure it was a long time ago now. Sure, you played that. You had Johnny Pisano was jumping off of speakers with his bass guitar and stuff. I was trying to talk to Wally Nile in the back, and he had eyes like Doug's Boz, as we say in Scotland, right? So he'd been on a tour for 50 days, and his eyes were hanging down below his glasses, and he couldn't understand a word that I was saying, Micky, not a word, and he was just kind of he was just ignoring me. So he was.
Willie's I had some of my best times on the road with Willie. He's an amazing character, Willie. He is a very deep and soulful man who you can have the deepest, most interesting, heartfelt conversations with Willie now 1 minute, and the next minute you're arguing over a packet of crisps.
Right.
You know,
right.
Also, and I don't mean arguing in a bad way. You know.
Right.
So,
I didn't really get a chance to know that well, but the next one, Guy Joe Durso come over. We played the Light of Day festival, and there was a fella, Guy Davis. Have you met Guy Davis as well?
Briefly. I met Guy. I think I did one of the gigs with him. Yeah, he was a really good, phenomenal musician. That guy,
The best
phenomenal.
I've
But
ever heard
I didn't really
the
meet him as
harmonica.
a person.
Best I've heard the harmonica
Yeah,
been played.
no,
Pretty awesome.
Yeah, he's a bit special. He's a bit special, mate. He is.
So
I tell you another night, just brought to my mind when you said Light of Day, as just a little. I played in Belgium one night. It was Antwerp, and I remember it snowing. So we're there in the snow, and we played this gig, and there was only a few hundred people there, and it was really lovely. But the best bit was we were in the back room, and there was a guy called Alejandro Escovedo, who is a massive name from the Americana stroke punk movement. Alejandro's probably 70 now, but he was part of the new wave scene that came out of California. Very influential, has been around forever, and really is a big solid name. So he's there. There's a guy called Jesse Malin, who's a big guy on the New York scene, who's great. Yeah, Jesse's there. There was a guy from Belgium. He wasn't playing, but he'd come to meet everyone, and he was like Belgium's #1 rock star. I can't remember who the guy was, but he was a nice guy, but he was well known to the crowd. So he's there. Joe's there, Willie's there. There was a few other, I can't remember who they were now, but all the big name people. And we're in the back room, and Alejandro Escovedo said to Jesse Malin, he said, you should do it. There's a song by Ronnie Lane. It's called Debris. Got beautiful. He said, you should sing that. He said, that you'd sing that well. That'd be a great song for you. And he said, I don't know it. He said, how does it go? And Alejandro said, I can't remember the words. So I just blurted out. I said, oh, I know it. So Alejandro said, well, I'll play it. He said, you sing it. So it's okay. So, and then it suddenly dawned on me. I'm stood there singing this fucking song in front of these legends. Like, it's just the best of the best. And I learned the song from Daryl. We were drunk one night in Largs. Daryl taught me the song.
All right.
So then I taught them. So it's just the way it goes. I just thought it was just so lovely that someone who I was nobody. I was just nobody. You imagine being at a golf tournament and standing up in front of Tiger Woods and Colin Mickelson there and saying, show me how to hit that ball again.
It's amazing. It's amazing that training, you're teaching yourself that one thing and putting in a wee bit of effort to all the different doors it's opened for that one aspect, Mickey, that one thing, teaching yourself how to play the guitar, and then just
but Adam, it did for you as well.
I feel the same. With
but it did.
I've done the same. I had a PlayStation. This is a wee story. I had a PlayStation 2, right? Stupid computer game. I've never played one since. I had a game, Metal Gear Solid, it was called, and it was quite difficult. It was a tactical game, and basically I was going to work, I was coming home, and I was playing this game. I was stuck in level 34, and I'd been stuck in level 34 for 3 months, and I was coming home, and I was XY triangle circle, L1, R2, X1 triangle circle, just all night trying to get past this. And one day it just dawned on me, I was like, what are you doing? You've been sitting here doing nothing for months upon months, and there's nothing. And I got up, and I wrapped up the PlayStation, and I flung it up in the loft, and I went and I bought myself a guitar, and I taught myself how to play the guitar rather than play the PlayStation, or play computers. And I can honestly say it was a great thing, because the amount of people I've been introduced to, like yourself, different things I've went and done, different things I've been involved with, just meeting people and doing the different things itself was great, and it wouldn't have happened if I didn't just take that wee leap to go teach myself something new, learn something new. Basically, it was like that with that. So that was quite interesting. Yeah. Mickey, see if I could take you back a wee bit. I know we kind of diverged off of it. I know you've
yes, mate.
Musical career, but if I could take you back just to your business, I'll go through the last 2 sections on this. If you're all right with that, Mickey,
yes.
Just to your business optician.
That'd be silly.
Go into depth, please. What your company actually does, or what you do as an optician, or your company, or what your shops actually do, in full depth for what they do.
Well, if like say for instance, you was trying to, suddenly you wake up, you're trying to read the paper and you can't read it anymore, you would go to the optician and you have an eye test with the optician, and he will give you a prescription like when you go to the doctors, and then that prescription is filled like by a chemist, and you buy a pair of glasses. So we are a supplier of the glasses side. Now, we have had at various times opticians, so we've offered the eye testing service, but mostly the shops I had were just retail outlets, so we didn't do the eye testing. So you'd come to us, and because glasses change, you see, people would always have one pair. Years ago, you'd have one pair of glasses, they'd last you till they fell apart, and you get another pair, and then they became more of a fashion item. So it's not unusual now. People can have 4 or 5 pairs and have sunglasses, or a pair for golf and a pair for the computer and all of that. So and there was the baby boom, they called it. There was a lot of people from my generation. The birth rates were big, so all of a sudden, when people hit 40, loads of people hit 40 around the same era, and that's when people start wearing glasses. So there was a probably the number of people needing glasses in the UK within a decade doubled. So there was a massive boom in the business.
I'll ask you 2 questions about that. What would you say the hardest thing? Would you say it's been the personnel? Is there anything else you can think of? And also, what advice would you give yourself back at the beginning? Looking back now, what advice would you give yourself now?
I would say keep it small. I wouldn't have, if I was doing it all again, I wouldn't have expanded like I did. I'd have kept 1, possibly 2 really good ones. Just do what you do and concentrate on what you do and do it as best as you can be. Don't, it's tempting to look at it and say, let's say for argument's sake, I'm making £1,000 a week. So if I have 20 shops, I'm going to make £20,000 a week. No, you won't. In all business, there's a thing called scale of economy, and it works. And scale of economy does work, but it's where it works. That's the big question mark. I think in my business, it works at around about 40 outlets, 40 shops. So from 1 to 40, from when you've got 1, it's easy. 1's good. You can make a good living. 2, you're all right. 3, 4, 5. Beyond that, from 5 to 40, you're going to have problems. Unless you're very lucky, you're going to have problems. You either got to be really lucky and get really good staff, or you've got to be really, really horrible and mercenary and treat your staff like dirt. I hate to say that, but it really is true. Once you get beyond that, you get scale of economy, and scale of economy allows you to do the things that basically iron out the staff problems. I'll give you, for instance, if you've got 5 shops and one person goes ill for a period of time, you're in trouble, because you're one person. If it's one of your key people and you've got 5 shops, 20% of your key work staff has gone. You're in trouble. If you've got 40 shops and 1 go down, you can get by. You've got enough income, if you like, to spread it, to move people into places. It's like when various governments they do schemes. I'll give you, for instance, like the workplace pension, for argument's sake. If you've got one little business and you've got 2 shops or a couple of restaurants or a couple of pubs or something, you've got maybe 5 employees, you've got to offer these people now pension. So you have all of the work involved in putting that together, overseeing it, running it, and all of those issues. And that has a cost. It has a cost to you in time and money and all of those things. If you're Tesco's and you've got to do a workplace pension, it's the same amount of work, exactly the same amount of work. But you've got 10,000 people. So, if you've got a cost of X, it's 10,000. X divided by 10,000 is your cost. If you've got 2 shops, it's X divided by 2. That's what I mean by scale of economy, Yeah, and that unfortunately is just because of globalization and because of the way business has gone. When I started, it was different. You could do what I did. I'm not so sure you could do it these days. I think the load from the state, if you like, or things like the workplace pension, and I'm not arguing against the workplace pension in any way. I'm just saying that's one of the things. One of the things that's now on business. Then there's all sorts of things now. You have that you didn't have to do before. And there are some of them for the better. The health and safety rules and laws and that they apply to to the one-man band as much as they do Asda's. It's the same rules, you know, and the same costs, unfortunately.
Would you say that when you're trying to expand, when you get to a certain amount of shops, there's the probability for things to go wrong in a higher percentage of the shops, and it makes it more difficult to manage in a whole, whereas when you had 2 shops, one guy was off, it was easier to manage. You knew that one, you maybe split your staff up, you knew where you're going. But if you were operating 12 shops and you had 3 staff no working, or something had went wrong with one of the shops, then trying to cover the shops, spread it across, wasn't working, or maybe just destroyed your profit margins and that sort of thing. So you get to a size when you've built to a certain size, but then the problems also expand with that, and because of that, then try to make your profit margin is more difficult. Is that something similar to what you were? Is that something similar to what you were saying, Micky?
Yeah, it's a bit like that. But you see, when you get big, you know, and say the question mark is, you know, how do you define big? I'll give you, for instance, again, you know, I would have a guy come to me, for argument's sake. Let's say a guy comes to me and he Ray-Ban sunglasses. He'd say, Mike, do you want to buy some Ray-Ban sunglasses? I'd say, yeah, how much are they? And he'd say, £35 a pair, for argument's sake. But he's got 2,000 pairs. And he's not going to split the deal. He just wants it done. You know, you get these deals all the time. So if you've got 10 shops, you can't sell 2,000 pairs of sunglasses. You can't. You could make, if you, let's say, let's take Ray-Ban as an instance. If you bought a pair for 35, you could sell them all day long for 75 quid. So you can make a healthy profit over the course of a summer. Mm-hmm. But you need 100 shops to do it. If you've got 4 or 5, you can't take advantage of that offer. Right. You know what I mean? You have that scale of economy. Right. You know, Tesco's, I don't know, Tesco's are buying a can of Coke for 8p, 10p perhaps. That your little local corner shop, he's paying 30p for it. You know? Right,
so there's a size you want to go to that you can start buying things in mass bulk, where the profit margin becomes better. Are you saying, where you need to get yourself to a certain level?
That's it. And what that profit margin does, Adam, that extra profit margin allows you the freedom to, going back to like staff being sick, if you like, you can have a few extra staff floating about. You can have that extra person in the store, because you're going to make that little bit more bottom line to account for that. When you're running a tight ship, when you're just struggling to keep your head above water, and you've got no margin of error, if something goes wrong, you know, you're below the waterline, you're sunk. Whereas the big boys, it's all in their favour in a way. I'm not blaming anyone, or I'm not. Please don't think I'm asking anyone to feel sorry for me like that. It's just the way business is. And the minute you start doing anything for yourself, you accept that, and that's part of the deal.
Do you think that's maybe the economics of all business? Do you think that maybe all fledgling companies, if they're trying to expand, there's a period in the middle of that expansion that things are really difficult, and that they need to reach a certain they need to reach a certain point before they can then reap the benefits of the change that they have. So there'll be a midway point. So if you're a business which only owns 1 or 2 properties that you're operating out of, and then you want to suddenly jump to 5 or 6, then you could potentially, the economics maybe work out that it's really difficult at 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 15 shops. That's the difficult stage, where you're no providing enough business for the major retailers to provide at a good cost, and X, Y, and Z. Your staff may be taking time off. So you think that applies across the board to all businesses, Micky? There.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it does. It does. So, you know, with that in mind, I would say, you know, and this is just me. I mean, there are other people that are different, of course. But for me, I would have, if I could have my time again, I wouldn't have opened loads of shops. I would have just kept it small and concentrated, you know, on this one particular place. And you know, I know people within my own business who've just got like one shop that's been going, you know, I won't go into details, name names, but people with one place that have done exactly that. They did the opposite to me. And, you know, some of them have made, and I mention money because that's what business is about. It's about money.
Yeah.
And they've made a phenomenal income, you know, done phenomenally well. Just little one, you know, and it's the same do you know what? It's the same in any business. I'll give you an example just quickly, because you know music business. In Farnham, the town I live in, we have a guitar shop called Guitar Village, and I know the owner of that very well. And he's just got the one shop, and he's concentrated there, and it's the best guitar shop in the country. You know, he was one of the first people to go in online. When you look at him guitar magazines, he's always got the full page advert, and he's got everything in there. If you want a £59 starter pack with a little pretend Fender and a little amp for your nipper for Christmas, he's got that. He can beat Argos, as do anyone on price. And if you want a £150,000 1956, you know, Martin or Gibson or something, he's got that as well, you know, right the way across the board. It's a big shop, and he's just concentrated on that one, you know. So you've got that, and he's doing very well, you know. He's got a good business there, and he does very, very well. And then you get like the chains, like in America, because I know the Guitar Center, I think they went bust, I think, and they were everywhere, you know. They had these big stores in every town. Guitar Center were a huge concern, and I think it's been the same over here as well. You know, we've had not so much big chains like that, but medium-sized chains have gone to the wall, you know, because they can't compete, because they haven't got the big enough to be that big a scale of economy to make it worthwhile, and they're not small enough to have that personal touch where they've got someone who can really concentrate on driving that one particular outlet, you know. So I guess what I'm saying, really, if anyone's listening and they care and they're starting up on their own, big isn't always best. You know, that's basically what I'm saying. It's, you know, you can do very well by keeping something small and doing it right. You know, that's the important thing.
So I was thinking it maybe goes back to what you were talking about earlier on, Mickey. We were talking about service, providing a good service. Initially, you felt as if that was one of the things you'd identified from one of the first companies you'd worked with, a family kind of run good service, but maybe that gets diluted. Maybe that gets diluted as you expand. It's hard to maintain that. And
yeah, it does.
Maybe it does apply to some people, that rather than trying to expand your business too quick, try and make your service better, make your network better, make your profit margins better through meeting new retailers, and try and make this, what you've got, operate better before you maybe expand anywhere out. Maybe that's a good thing.
Well, there's a way. You see, a lot of businesses find this. It's not akin to me. It was a lot of find it, and many of them overcome it by they go down a route of franchising.
Right.
So what that does, it means that the person in every store, every store you've got in each store, the person who's working there actually owns a portion of the store. So that their attitude then becomes better, you know. And all the optical practices have gone down that route. All the big ones, you know. Boots opticians were massive. Specsavers was always a franchise. Boots never was, and they franchised pretty much all the stores they can. The other big chain, Vision Express, they've gone down that route. So they've all followed suit. They've all gone down that because they found the same as me. It's really, really difficult, especially with, for want of a better expression, especially with professional people. Professional people aren't always necessarily the most commercially aware people. It doesn't come to them easy. You know, it's a rare person who thinks commercially, who also thinks academically. You know what I mean? You know, there aren't many great scientists who are good businessmen, and there aren't many good businessmen who are great scientists, but occasionally you have someone who's both, but they're rare.
Yeah, you give that somebody that bit of responsibility, or if they're in the workplace, if they're got shares in it, or they've got responsibility in it, and then they'll start automatically treating it like their own, rather than being an employee of the company who is just just a person. I can see how that would be difficult, Mickey, as you're starting a company, trying to get somebody to care as much as you do about the service that you're about to provide, and how you would get somebody to actually, you know, how you motivate somebody in a shop, especially if you're 12 and you're trying to motivate 12 different people, and everybody needs a different thing, you know, and maybe some of them get it and some of them don't. That must have been difficult. Yeah. It must be really difficult to try and get that, and to see how that...
Well, it's not one size fits all, Adam, you see. Yeah. Some people are motivated by money and only money. They don't care about anything. It's just like, what's in it for me? How much is it for me? And yet all the studies that have existed where they've actually looked into it, and they found that for most if you take a sample of people, for instance, the money is about the third or fourth most important thing overall, but not for everyone. It's the reason why I hate to say it, and I will, if there's anyone listening to this, I'm not belittling them in any way. It's the reason why you go into a lot of big corporate companies nowadays and people are wearing a badge and they've got a title. That's sometimes more important than the money. You give someone a badge and the title, that's worth. These corporate companies are very cynical. It's like, I can give this guy a $5,000 pay rise, or I can give him a 50p badge, and the result for them will be the same. So they're great manipulators. I was never good at that. You know, I just wasn't the way I thought. But I know that's the way they think, because I've worked for some of these companies, and I've sat at meetings where they've stated that to be the case.
I've sat with, I'm talking with God Hunter on the last podcast and talking about different PLC companies, and obviously God Hunter, he works with a non-profit organisation which provides a good service, and he gets a lot of kind of benefit for that. He enjoys providing a good service. It provides him a lot of satisfaction in his life for doing that. And when you work for some companies, are big soulless entities which are totally just profit driven 100%, and everything and everybody will get shoved out the way. People are expendable, and that's the whole ethos of the company. Is that it can be really difficult. That it doesn't bode well with with being human and just total being profit driven.
Well, that's exactly what I said to you earlier. I said, you know, when you set out, if you start expanding a business, you've either got to be very lucky and get the right people, you've got to be horrible. And that's what I meant by that, you know. And that, unfortunately, it is true. You know, you've either got to be, say, extremely lucky, or you've got to be horrible. You've got to be ruthless. Yeah, you know, absolutely ruthless. And I, you know, I won't mention any names, but just in my business alone, I could tell you the most successful person in my business, who is the owner of the biggest chain, and you cannot believe how much money this guy's got and how much money he's made. He would kill you for a packet of fags.
Is this one of your employees, Micky?
No. I'm using the term loose. I'm totally using the term loosely. But anyone in my business would know exactly what I was talking about, you know. And he's been by far and away the most successful person, and the stories that abound around him are legendary. You know, it's like, so it's the same in the music business, you know, in any business really. The
more ruthless you are, the better you go on. You saying there in business.
Yeah. You know, you can't believe some of the lengths that they will go to. And I've never been able to do that. Never sit well with me. Never ever sat well with me. I give one real quick example. I had a lady who worked for me for years, and she was lovely. And she came to work one day and she was crying her eyes out. And she was in her probably 50s. And I said, whatever's wrong? Are you okay? And she said, I'm not good. She said, my mother's been to hospital and she's been diagnosed with this horrible illness, and you know, she's basically got weeks to live. And I said, why are you at work? She said, I have to work. I can't afford it. I said, look, you go home, you be with your mum. I said, look after mum. I said, don't worry about anything. I said, we'll pay you. 18 months later, mum's still hanging on. She's on full pay.
Oh, God.
I'd ring her up and say, how's your mum? Oh, she's doing much better. I'd go, no.
You don't even have the decency to die.
I know. I was sending people around there jumping out, and I go, ah! Anyway, eventually the poor lady, you know, she passed away, and we're laughing about it. But you know, I don't regret anything. I did the right thing. But this just gives you a, for instance, I had this lady on the payroll for 18 months. I wouldn't have changed it for the world, because that's the way I was. But so I paid her 18 months. She came back to work. She worked for a week. She said to me, I don't think I can handle work anymore. She said, I'm going to leave. I want to leave, like, with immediate effect. So I said, oh, okay. So she's worked. She had 18 months wages, not done no work, came back for a week, then left. And I got a letter a week later asking for her holiday money.
God's sake, Mickey, did you just soak that one up, did you? Did you just soak it up and fucking... That's unreal, isn't it?
Well, I think I just gave it to her. I was gobsmacked. Because I liked her. She was nice.
And in that respect, though,
but that's what you have to deal with. It's things like that. It's just, you know, I got a million stories like that, but, you know.
I think, though, in that respect, both you and God have managed to have good livings. I'm no good livings. You've been financially quite stable throughout the years through your companies, you would say. Is that right?
Oh, good times and bad times, mate. Good times and bad times. It's not always been great.
You've been.
Yeah, it's been bad.
It's been bad at times as well. You've been in the lows.
Oh, I think anyone who's been in business will tell you the same. Oh yeah, right. Awful, absolutely awful.
Was there anything specifically that took it down? That took it down to its lowest state?
I think, you know, for us, Christmas was always a bad time. People don't buy glasses, and I remember one specific time. It was Christmas Eve. My youngest daughter she needed a laptop for school, and she'd asked me. She'd been on at me all year to buy her a laptop. And things were tough business wise. I think this was around the 2008, 2009, what we were talking about when it all went pear shaped, and I distinctly remember it was Christmas Eve and she was after a laptop and I hadn't bought her one. I had no money at all. And I was just hoping all week that someone would come in and spend some money so I'd have some money to buy her a laptop. So I'm there on Christmas Eve working and literally it was Christmas Eve. There's no one about. You know, it's just nothing. Not in our business. There's no one about. So I'm having to sit there and I'm hating myself to think, well, what am I going to tell her? I can't afford a laptop, which she needs for school. And it got so bad, we had a charity. I didn't steal it, but I borrowed it. I borrowed the money out of the charity thing. It was about 20 quid. 20 quid, you know, from the bloody, from the blind box, you know. I put it back in, of course, but so that's about the lowest I got. But just to take on from there, I just distinctly remember that day being there, probably the lowest I've ever been, where, you know, you got to borrow the money from the bloody charity box. And I'm sat there looking, well, probably like, you know, like the whole world has ended. And a guy walked by, he was one of our customers. And he was a nice chap. He'd been to us for a few years, and me and him had always had a laugh. And he was a nice guy. And he poked his head in the door and he said, "Happy Christmas, mate." I said, "Yeah, happy Christmas." He said, "You all right?" I said, "No, I'm fine." He said, "You don't look it." He says, "You're not your usual self. You look right miserable." I said, "Oh, it's been a tough time." He said, "What's the problem then?" I said, "It's just no bloody money." I said, "I'm supposed to get my daughter a laptop for Christmas." I said, I've not got her one yet." He said, "Well, why don't you give me a shout? That's what I do." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "I get laptops." He said, I deal in the office, you know, I refurbish offices and pick things up and redo offices. And so I said, "I've got a ton of laptops." So I refurbish them and sell them on eBay. He said, "Well, what do you want for her?" I said, "I don't know, just something nice." I said, "Well, I haven't got any money." He said, "Don't worry about the bloody money." He said, "We'll sort that out later." He said, "You here for long?" I said, "I'm here." "Oh, right." So he said, "I'll go and get you one." And half hour later, he was back in the shop with this laptop, which was, well, it was like brand new. It was beautiful. Nice. And I could have cried, you know. It's just the kindness of strangers, you know. And because I'd been decent to him, he'd come in. I've always been a believer in that. Something will turn up. The world will karma. The world will turn. It will come round to you. If you do the right thing, it will come back to you, and it will do the right thing for you. You know. And he reminded me, this guy. I said to him, "I can't thank you enough." And he reminded me of the time of, I'd forgot all about it, years before. His mother was at a family barbecue and she'd fallen over on the patio and smashed her glasses. It was a Sunday afternoon. And he knew someone who knew me, and he rang me on my mobile and said, "You're not about, are you? Mum's broke her glasses. She can't see where she's going," you know, blah, blah, blah. So I shot round his house and picked these bloody glasses up, went into the shop. We were closed at the time, but I took them to the shop, fixed them, took them back to him. And he said, "Oh, what do I owe you?" I could have said to him 100 quid, 50 quid, 80 quid, whatever. I could have said anything, and he'd have just gone, there you go, you know. I said, oh, don't be silly, you know. His poor old mum sat there with a big bloody bruise, and she's upset. Oh, I couldn't take money off him. I said, no, don't be silly. And he said, well, that's really nice of you. That's bloody good of you, you know. And years later, out the blue, boom, there it is. You know, my little girl had a laptop. So
Returned the favour.
I believe that. I believe
customer service as well. Again, there, Mickey. You know, you're going out of your way to look after.
Yeah.
Like call it a client. You know, the client who's maybe in a vulnerable age and stuff like that. A wee bit extra customer service maybe goes a long way there. So that was your lowest step. You came out your lowest step, and it you didn't get up for that point there, and it picked back up the next year after that, Mickey. And going with it. And,
once you know you get through Christmas, then you have the weather starts changing, suddenly people start coming in, and you know you only need a few good days and you're back on your feet. But it's hard when you come from my background. I think you will understand this, Adam, and what I'm going to tell you. I never had the mum and the dad. I never had I never had anyone I could go to and to help me through the bad times. I was on my own, you know.
Right.
And the banks at the time, the banks didn't want to know. If you had £1 million in the bank, they wouldn't have lent you a tenner. And I don't say that joking. That's our way it was. So you were on your own. You were really like, that was as low as it got, you know. So that teaches you lessons. That's all. You know, it teaches you hard lessons. Teach you who your friends are, really.
Yeah. Did you come through the recession then and have to trail through that and struggle through the recession, Mickey? Then has things picked up since then? Are they getting stronger in the last while, or is it this?
It was at that time I was beginning to wind things down as well a bit, Adam, and it was. You know, at that sort of time, I pretty much after that, I think it was. It's hard to know in the depth of time what was what, but it was around that time. I ended up selling the shops and really moving into the music thing. And in the last few years, it's been completely different. But not scaling things down. It was really crazy because I probably had that chain of shops for, 10, 15 years. And I would say within a month of getting rid of them, when I was just left with the one shop, I remember telling someone I made more money last month with that one shop than I ever did when I had the 10, you know, and all the time I had them. You know, it was
interesting that there's maybe a lesson in there to be learned for people. Or 40s, you know, just too big, and you're just it couldn't be the answer, might not be the answer sometimes.
Exactly that, mate. Keep it small. Keep your goal. Don't lose sight of your goal. Do what you do. Just concentrate on what you do. Don't try and do anything that you can't do, and do what you do the best. And look after your customers and all that, and they look after you in whatever business you're in. The rules are the same, I think. I do.
I think that's a good point, Mickey. I think that's a good point to leave it on there. I was going to ask last little bits just about what advice would you give your 14-year-old self? Already covered that. And then the other point would be, would there be any advice you would give to anybody who was just starting off their career? What advice would you give to somebody who was just starting off their working career, mate, looking back at your owners? What would you give them?
Definitely do it. If you've got something that you've got a passion about, do it. But try and think with your head, not your heart. You know, think realistically about what you're doing. Ask yourself the hard questions. We've all seen the Dragon's Den, you know, when you see people go on that. And you can see these people, they've got this wonderful dream, and to them, it makes every sense in the world. But the minute they get a few hard questions thrown at them, it just crumbles. You've got to ask yourself those hard questions and answer those hard questions. And if you can't, don't do it. But if you can, if you get the hard questions thrown at you and you can answer them, then do it. But just be honest with yourself, because everyone should have a chance to do what they want to do, but some people have crazy ideas, you know what I mean? You know, and some people will tell you, just do it, do whatever you want to do, just do it. But you can't. You do something stupid in business, you screw yourself up for life, really. Sometimes, you know, you get a bad reputation, you start running up bills that you can't pay, you go bankrupt, and all of those things, and they knock you back. Whereas if someone had stopped you and said, "What are you doing?" Well, I'm going to be setting up a window cleaning round. Whereabouts? On this estate where I live. Okay, well, this estate's full of high-rise blocks of flats. How many windows are you going to clean? With that ladder, you're going to get up there? Oh, yeah. I hadn't thought of that. Well, maybe think of that now before you go and spend £20,000 on a van. If you're thinking of doing so, go to the smartest person you know. Don't just take it all from one person and say to them, "This is what I want to do. Prove me wrong." Ask them. So ask them honestly. Say, "Look, pull my plan to bits." Doesn't matter who it is.
Yourself the hard
doesn't have to be.
That's a good one, Mickey. I do like that. I like that. Ask yourself the hard question.
And get someone on the outside looking in, because it's really funny. People on the outside looking in see more than you do sometimes. You know, a fresh pair of eyes and all of that. You know, it's never be frightened to ask advice from people, even if it's not the business they're in. They'll ask the question that the regular punter will ask, and that sometimes is the most important question.
Sometimes even they'll not give you advice that you were hoping for or expecting, but that maybe lead to you to thinking in a path that you or something coming up that you never thought about in the first.
100%. But you know what, Adam? I won't labour the point too much, but in the business world, so many good things have come out of doing exactly that. A guy I worked for once, years and years ago, but he was a sales manager at one of the companies, and he told me a story. He worked for Philips Communications. They were an electronics company. He worked for them for years. But he told me the story about Sony and how they came up with and I don't know how true it was, and I might even have forgotten some of the details, but the stories. But it's how they came up with the Sony Walkman. What they were looking for a product that people could dictate into. They could press a button and dictate, and then give it to their secretary and say, "Look, write that letter, you know, dear Brian, can you send me this?" You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it was like an aid to them forgetting things. And they couldn't really get it to record very well. They had problems with the recording, because it wasn't like today, of course. It was on tape and all that, and there was all sorts of problems with it. But what they did find, they could play back really good. It was great at playing back. So they were at the meeting one day, all pulling their hair out, going, "Well, we spent millions and years trying to develop this, and we cannot get this function right, but it plays brilliantly." And then someone said, "Well, why don't we just sell it as a player?" "Well, who wants that?" "Well, you can have your music on the go. You can listen to tapes and when you walk around." "Oh, that's a good idea. No one had thought of that." The Sony Walkman, that's how it came about. Well, look, can you imagine a world now without them? Or some device like that? You know, your mobile phone, of course, as it is now. But that's how it came about. It wasn't what they set out to develop, but they changed what they were going to do, you know, midstream, to go. And if you've got a business idea, it might well be by discussing it with other people that you change it a little bit and end up with something better than what you was initially going to be trying to do. You know?
So maybe be willing to be flexible then, Mickey. You're saying at times then it might not always be the game plan that you set out with.
That's it, mate.
Something else might pop up, and
100%.
You have to be flexible and move with the times and be expecting that potentially.
Yeah.
Mickey, I'll round it up. I don't want to keep you for too much longer. I really appreciate you.
No problem.
Do It Now podcast, mate. I really appreciate you taking the time out, and I enjoyed seeing you and I enjoyed speaking to you again, mate.
Likewise, mate.
Hopefully when this pandemic thing's all done, mate, you'll be back up Scotland playing some music sometime, mate, and we'll get a jam together.
That would be nice, wouldn't it?
Would be good. Hopefully not too long, Mickey, for us all. I think we're all a bit fed up now, and hopefully it's not too long, any longer, mate, and world will be back up. But thanks very much, mate. Thanks very much again. Really appreciate it.
Bless you. Thank you, Adam.
Welcome to Do It Now, a platform for you to learn from those that have already done it. Do it now.